Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Are state governments to blame for the confusion and chaos that surrounds India's vaccination policy, as the Prime Minister has alleged, or is that an unfair and unwarranted conclusion? That's the key issue I shall raise today with Trinamool MP Mahua Moitra. Ms. Moitra, on Monday when he addressed the country, the Prime Minister said that he had fallen under pressure from various state governments and as a result he had changed the vaccination policy, leading to the confusion and chaos that prevails today. And his point was very simple. State governments are responsible for the mess we have today. And in particular, your state government. How do you respond to that?
This is the Iron Man, the Loho Purush, the 56-inch chest. Never in his life has he ever listened to any state government and changed tack. This obviously has nothing to do with state governments whatsoever. Modi ji is simply doing what he does best, which is trying to get out of a sticky situation and trying to deflect blame. I really urge the Prime Minister to look in the mirror, and like Dorian Gray, he will see his picture change as he keeps lying. And it's like Pinocchio with his nose getting longer, because the vaccine policy has been a mess right from the word go, and it's come to a point now where they had absolutely no way out. They were caught with their back to the wall, with the Supreme Court coming out with probably a very, very strong stricture very soon, and the entire country was up in arms as to how an elected government with a majority as large as the one the BJP has could come up with something like this.
Let me be absolutely specific. You referred in that answer to Dorian Gray, you referred to Pinocchio. Are you saying the Prime Minister, when he addressed the country on Monday, was lying?
Yes, of course he was. Yes, of
lying,
course.
actually
yes,
lying.
I mean, you can call it prevarication, you can call it lies, you can call it whatever. But
you're calling it lying?
Absolutely, because the state governments have nothing to do with this. Under the National Disaster Management Act, right from when the pandemic started, the Prime Minister has been in charge of pandemic control. And to come out and say now that the state governments have anything to do with it is an outright lie. But of course.
Let's look at the facts from Mr. Modi's point of view for a moment. His claim was that he was under pressure from various state governments. I'm going to quote your state government, Mamata Banerjee. On the 24th of February, she wrote a letter to Mr. Modi demanding that state governments be given permission to buy vaccines directly. Where did she believe that she had the confidence and the ability to do so?
Mamata Banerjee is a chief minister of a state. Like other chief ministers in Maharashtra and in other states, what is a chief minister supposed to do when people are dying? The Prime Minister of this country was busy in mid to late February preparing for the Kumbh Mela and preparing for an 8-phase Bengal election. The central government was doing absolutely nothing to ensure that the vaccination policy was equitable and that the majority of people in our country were vaccinated. So of course state governments, including Mamata Banerjee, came out in February and said, listen, if you can't do this, let us try and do it. We had to do something.
In other words, she was filling a gap that he had left empty.
But of course, because here we had a vaccination policy that was completely skewed. The central government had missed the boat on ordering vaccines, on production, on ordering, on procurement, and we were stuck with a situation in February where we did not even have enough vaccines to vaccinate frontline workers and over 60s.
The problem is that her claim that she would be better able than Mr. Modi at acquiring vaccines was actually not based on facts. Let me give you a couple of reasons why. To begin with, she knew this better than anyone else, that Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca had pre-sold and more than pre-sold what they were producing to countries like the United Kingdom, the United States, the European Union, Canada, Japan. There were no vaccines available. In fact, the European Union was suing AstraZeneca for failure to comply with commitments. In those circumstances, when Mamata Banerjee says to the Prime Minister, give us permission, I'll go buy them, who was she going to buy them from? There were none to sell.
Just a second. Mamata Banerjee was only pointing out exactly what the central government had done wrong. The central government had only blocked 11 million vaccines from the Indian manufacturers.
Can I interrupt?
No, you have to. Let me answer the question. Mamata Banerjee on the 24th of February had to come out like other chief ministers and say that, listen, you didn't fill the gap, let us do something. We couldn't just sit on our hands and wait.
Except she wasn't saying, let us do something, let us try even if we fail.
Yes.
What she said was much more specific. She said, we would request you to kindly take up the matter with appropriate authority so that state government is able to purchase the vaccines from designated points on priority basis.
Yes,
the problem is, she knew, or she should have known, no matter what effort she put in, she couldn't purchase them because there were none to sell.
One second, that was the fact that there were none to sell had nothing to do with Mamata Banerjee. It had everything to do, hear me out, had everything to do with the central government's failure to procure vaccines when they should have in 2020 and 21. Please hear me out. So Mamata Banerjee in February, like other state governments, are faced with the prospect of a population that needs vaccination. We're in the middle of the most terrible second wave, and of course we're going to go out and say, listen, we have to try.
I hear everything you're saying, but your let me finish. Yeah. I hear what you're saying, but your chronology is wrong. The problem created by the Modi government was in 2020. Mamata was writing in February 2021, and in February 2021, she was saying to Mr. Modi, give me permission, I can buy them, you can't. The problem is, she couldn't. She wanted permission to do something she should have known she could never achieve because there were none to sell.
It was not the question of Mamata. Different countries were buying at that time trying to buy via global tenders. The central government failed spectacularly. Was Mamata Banerjee wrong? Was Uddhav Thackeray wrong? Were other state governments wrong? Hear me out, Karan. Should state governments, you're trying to push the buck on us. Should state governments, when their people are dying, when in the middle of a second wave, which by the way in late February the government was saying everything is hunky-dory. Mamata came out and said, listen, whatever the way is, let's find a way.
Let me give you a second reason why in fact Mamata's claim that she could buy vaccines where Modi can't is wrong. A, because as I pointed out, vaccines weren't available. Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca were oversold. They had none to sell.
Yes.
So the claim that I can do it, even if you can't, was a silly claim to make. But there's a second reason.
Yeah.
Vaccine manufacturers had made it clear they would only sell to central governments. In no country was a state government being sold to directly. Why would those manufacturers make an exception for Bengal?
One second. I think, Karan, your chronology here is wrong. When Mamata Banerjee wrote that letter, it is only after, sometime in late March, that different companies came out and they told the Maharashtra government that, by the way, we are not going to deal directly with state governments. When Mamata came out in February,
Pfizer and Moderna had made it clear in January. In January, they made it clear they would only sell to central governments.
Because Pfizer and Moderna had the issue of indemnification, which was still pending.
There were two issues. There wasn't one. And Pfizer and Moderna had made it clear they will only sell to central governments. They'd made it clear all over the world that they won't even sell to large corporates. Even Germany attempted their individual states, or Länder as they're called, to buy directly, and they were told no.
So what was Mamata Banerjee supposed to do? This vaccine procurement, we said right from day one, this is something that the central government should have done. This is something the central government should have done. Universal free vaccination is a constitutional obligation of the central government. Please hear me out, Karan, do not interrupt. This is something they failed spectacularly in. Come February, when our people were dying for vaccines, Mamata Banerjee, as a responsible chief minister, flagged the issue and said, hey, listen, let's find a way. If you can't do it, let's try and do it.
Do you know what your answer amounts to?
Yes.
That Mamata Banerjee, knowing that she couldn't buy them because there were none to sell, knowing that in fact they wouldn't sell to state governments because that was already made clear, was still saying to Modi, let me try even if I fail. That's not a helpful suggestion.
No, of course that is a helpful suggestion. We're at least trying to do something when the central government in February was in complete denial. Please understand, you have a chief minister on the 24th of February saying we have a problem. The central government in February...
Forgive me, your chief minister claimed to have a solution, and
no,
I'm pointing out that solution was wrong.
Correct. That is
it
not
was
correct.
non-existent.
That is not correct. All she said was, we have a problem. As a chief minister, let us try and find a solution because you are holding everything in your hands.
She wasn't asking for consultation to find a solution. She was suggesting what she wanted and demanding the right to buy. I'm saying there were none to sell.
There was none to sell, but at least we should go out as a state government. Was Maharashtra equally wrong?
Let me try even though I failed. No, that's what you say. Let me try even though I failed.
Because what were we supposed to do? Were we supposed to act like the central government? Not at all.
That's not really a helpful suggestion.
I think you're just playing right into the hands of the central government and trying to make...
I'm playing devil's advocate against a very foolish position taken by Mamata Banerjee.
It was not a foolish position at all. As a state government faced with the prospect of a population that had no access to vaccines, faced with the prospect of a terrible second wave, which, by the way, the central government had not even woken up to.
You know what this amounts to? I know that there's no door. I'll bang my head against the wall. Maybe it'll break. That's what Mamata Banerjee was saying.
You know
Let me try. You know, it's better than doing nothing.
Absolutely. When you're stuck in a room and you don't have a lock, sometimes it's good when you've got to get your children out of a sticky mess and you're stuck in a room and you've got to get them out. Perhaps as a mother, as a chief minister, if she's trying to break her head on the door and try and get the door open, that's better than sitting in there and saying, you know what, I don't have the key.
Let me point out
That's not such a bad thing at all.
Let me point out something else that Mamata Banerjee said in that letter of the 24th, which is even worse. It's bad enough that she claimed that she could get vaccines that weren't available. It's bad enough that she believed that manufacturers would sell to state governments when it was clear they wouldn't. What was even worse is that she demanded universal vaccination for everyone over 80. Now, at a time when we didn't have enough vaccines for people over 60, leave aside over 45, by demanding it be given to the age group 18 to 44, which is 600 million more, she was making a bad situation hugely worse.
Karan, I genuinely believe, I mean, I'm surprised at your line of questioning, and it's great that you want to put the opposition on the mat, but I genuinely believe that with a question like this, your audience is going to have a field day, because they're going to be like,
but that's
what
not
is
answering
wrong?
my question.
No, I'm going to answer
my question.
I will answer
How
your
can
question.
you demand that vaccination be given to the 18 and 44-year-olds when you
second.
Don't have enough?
One second,
and you're
the
making
fact
a
that
bad situation worse.
One second, excuse me, Karan, you're coming to the state government for answers when the problem has been of, no, please let me finish, when the problem has been of the central government's making. Every single civilized country in the world, be it Canada, be it the UK, be it the European countries, be it the US, way back in 2020 said, this is our population which needs to be vaccinated. In India, it was, please let me hear me out, please hear me out.
I'm not even interrupting.
No, that's fine.
But
the gesturing is throwing me off. So let me finish. It is definitely that we needed a population that needs to be vaccinated.
No one denies it.
Yes, one second.
No one denies it. You're
So when we needed to vaccinate it, the central government missed the boat on procurement.
No,
right?
but we're not talking about procurement. We're talking about ages
Yes,
now.
but definitely. So we needed universal free vaccination.
Everyone says you do, but you have to go through it in stages.
But,
There's not a country in the world that gave it to 18-year-olds when we did.
Yes, one second. The government of India, when it came out with their frontline workers on the 16th of January, when the government opened it out, the pace at which the central government was doing its vaccination, it would have taken, hear me out,
because
would have taken a total
have enough vaccines.
But that's not our fault. That's something that they messed up on.
Don't you understand? You're missing the whole point.
No, I'm not missing the whole point.
Let me finish and then you'll understand. You accept that they didn't have enough vaccines. You just did. It's because they didn't have enough vaccines that the pace was slow. Now, when they don't have enough vaccines for 60-year-olds, they certainly don't for 45-year-olds. At that point, to put pressure that they should include 80-year-olds, and that's 600 million people more, you're making a bad situation incomparably
not at
worse.
all, not at all. The idea was at that point to go in and say that the third wave is coming in. There are, unlike, please hear me out. Unlike in 28, and the second wave, sorry, the second wave.
There was no second wave.
Yes, there was. We didn't even know about it. Of course it was. In February,
but if you didn't know about it, how can you claim it was happening?
In February 2020, February 24th, we were perfectly aware. There were signs all around. Other countries had already been affected by the second wave. We all knew it was only a matter of time before it was coming here. It was only Mr. Modi and the rest of his bureaucrats that were blindsided to this. Everybody else was aware of this, number one. The second thing is
I have to dispute that.
Not at all.
And point out to the audience that you're claiming with hindsight a knowledge that wasn't available at the time.
That's not true at all. Everyone, every single person with half a mind knew at the end of February it was a matter of time that the second wave was going to hit India. First. The second thing was the question, the Modi government was functioning at a pace that was known, the reasons for which were known only to them. Hear me out. Even if they were to prioritize over 60s, they only ordered 11 million doses. The point was that
none of that answers the question I asked. Why introduce 600 million people suddenly when you don't have enough vaccines?
Because we wanted this Indian government to go out there and say, you know what, we need to buy from foreign manufacturers.
Do you know what the head of NTAGI, Dr. N.K. Arora, said to me? He said it was a mistake to introduce the vaccinations to the 18-44-year-old group because we didn't have them.
Because
let me finish. We did it before any other country in the world did. Number three, every country in the world gave it in a graded way from the elderly to the next lot to the next. India, under pressure from your chief minister and other chief ministers, was suddenly forced to jump. And this is another error that the pressure brought by Mamata Banerjee made the government pay. I don't deny that Mr. Modi made the error, but it happened under pressure and that pressure was wrong.
Karan, Mr. Modi and the BJP do not come under pressure from anybody. Let me lay out three things very clearly, very clearly. Universal free vaccination is a right of every Indian. Number one, it is not the
but
state.
Not
let me finish.
At one go
Please
when you don't have the vaccine.
Please let me finish. Every single government in the world, be it the UK, be it the US, be it the Canada, when they're talking about planning for the future, they don't plan that they will only vaccinate over 60-year-olds. Please let me finish. The way the Indian government did.
No, the Indian government
yes,
didn't.
They did. Yes, they did. Not at all. No, I am not misrepresenting.
The Indian government made it clear we're starting with health workers,
no,
then
one
frontline
second,
workers, then over 60,
they did not,
and gradually
by
it will come
February
to everyone else.
24th, the state governments were not even given enough to vaccinate over 60s.
Then why suddenly include 80-year-olds?
Because we said that for now,
you're contradicting
not
yourself.
at all. I'm not contradicting. We are just saying that, listen, you are relying only on the Serum Institute and on Bharat Bio vaccine to fulfill it. Please go out there, do whatever it takes. Talk to Moderna, talk to Pfizer,
yes.
talk to whoever it takes, and plan on universal free vaccination.
Talking to everyone would help you get sufficient vaccines for the over 60-year-olds. Don't at that point suddenly insist 18-year-olds have to come in. You brought in 600 million people.
We didn't bring it in.
You did under pressure from you.
No, we didn't do this. Who is this pressure under? This pressure is under pressure from your own children, from my children. Who is the pressure under? The Indian population. There was a huge risk to the population of this time. The second wave has hit people disproportionately between the ages of 30 to 50.
Can I stop you there? Other countries have had second and third waves. India hasn't had a third wave. In other countries, the third was often worse than the second. In America and in Britain, just to take those two examples, when the second wave hit and the third wave hit, the age of population which wasn't being vaccinated did not begin to put pressure on the government and say, there's a second wave, there's a third, please jump the line and vaccinate us.
Nobody asked them to.
Mamata Banerjee did precisely that.
Mamata Banerjee did what the central government should have done on day one, which is plan on having a universal free vaccination for all Indians, should have put in an order and planned on procuring 1 billion vaccines right in 2020, and as those came in phases, because hear me out, because no manufacturer,
that hadn't been done,
forcing
him to bring in the 18-year-old at the wrong time makes a bad
Karan, you're
worse.
trying to make me laugh. This is Prime Minister Modi who walked out on your own interview. Nobody can force Modi to do anything. This is very conveniently played into him. This is very conveniently played into his story. The central government failed spectacularly at every stage of the vaccination process, and it is now trying to deflect the blame on the state government.
Let me put it like this, and I'm summing up. Chief ministers, prime amongst which was your Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee, made political and what I call unrealistic demands. Mr. Modi's mistake was that instead of standing up for what he was doing, which was the right thing in the right way, he actually caved in. Now, he made a mistake buckling under your pressure, but I'm pointing out to you that to put that pressure when India was going through the worst imaginable surge, remember, we hit 414 cases a day. To put that political pressure, raising unrealistic demands when we are going through the worst surge was a terrible mistake. You pushed the Prime Minister into making a mistake. It's his mistake, I don't deny it. He erred hugely. But you pushed him into it, and you shouldn't have. At that point, you should have been supporting him rather than pushing him into error.
This Prime Minister doesn't need anyone pushing him into error. He's messed this up from the word go. And if you're under any kind of a false impression that anyone's pushed him into it, the only reason he's done this is because he's come under huge pressure himself from his own electorate and from his own vote bank, where people have been dying and where the hospital infrastructures have been completely inadequate. There's been no vaccination. There hasn't been enough oxygen. The last 2 months have been probably the worst in Modi's electoral career. And that is what pushed on him. It is not a letter from Mamata Banerjee. I wish it were. So I think Modi has come around.
The Prime Minister has said to the country that under pressure from the state government, and in particular your state government, he did things that were wrong.
The Prime Minister, under whose pressure did he let 96 lakh people come to the Kumbh? Was it under Mamata Banerjee's pressure? Under whose pressure? Under whose pressure did Prime Minister come out on the 18th of April and liberalize the vaccine policy, where he allowed the state governments to come in and buy the vaccines which were apparently not available at 3x the price of what the centre was assuming?
That's what I said.
So the
your
Prime
pressure
Minister
pushed the Prime Minister into making a terrible mistake. The mistake is the Prime Minister's. He takes the blame for it. But putting pressure on him when we are going through the worst surge was the worst thing you could have done.
From the minute this pandemic has started, every state government has been left on its own. We haven't even got our GST dues cleared. Every single state government has been left on its own to deal with the pandemic. The central government and Mr. Modi has failed spectacularly. To come out and to blame this on the state governments now is a very poor, sorry attempt at deflecting blame.
Let's move to the second part of the Prime Minister's address. You know and I know that in the address to the country, he claimed that he was pushed into this by the state governments, that the state governments are to blame for the confusion, the chaos and the mess. There are others who say that in fact the Prime Minister is changing his policy, and the change happens on the 21st of June because he's worried about the Supreme Court. Not only has the Supreme Court said that his policy is arbitrary and irrational, but probably every leading lawyer believes that if the next hearing had happened, and we don't know what will happen when the next hearing happens, the Supreme Court could have declared the policy unconstitutional because it allegedly violates Article 21, it allegedly violates Article 14. Do you believe that in fact, despite what he said, he blamed your state government, the truth is he was worried about the Supreme Court and that's why he's changing the policy?
Mr. Modi, like I said, he does this very well. The Prime Minister does this very well. He reads the signs and he figures out how to get himself out of a tight spot. So even with the Solicitor General...
So Pinocchio becomes the artful daughter?
Yeah, clearly. But you have, you had a Solicitor General who, during the worst of the pandemic in 2020, said to the Supreme Court, stood up on the Supreme Court and said that there are no migrants on the road. Stood up again in April to the Supreme Court and told the Chief Justice, in fact, that there is no oxygen crisis. So, but this time the bench led by Justice Chandrachud was very clear. On May 31st, the observations made by the bench were very clear, and it was very clear that the Supreme Court was going to come down like a ton of bricks. Because remember, you can have a pliant judiciary, you can kind of, everybody wants to give the central government, especially in something like this where people are dying, a long rope. But when people are dying, when judges can't get their wives and their relatives admitted into hospitals, when members of the bar are dying, that's when the pressure is also on the judiciary.
So the policy is changing on the 21st of June because the Prime Minister is scared about the Supreme Court?
Definitely, because if you go by what the verbal sort of observations were on the 31st of May, arbitrary, irrational, and why is the difference in pricing? Why are people above 18 not allowed access to vaccines? So all the questions that you claim Mamata Banerjee raised in her letter of February 24 are absolutely actually in line with what Justice Chandrachud has said now.
So Justice Chandrachud's comments, as well as what lawyers were now beginning to fear would be the outcome, that the policy could be struck down as unconstitutional, is what worried Mr. Modi, you say. And that's why he's announced he's going to change the policy, because he wants to avoid the embarrassment of the Supreme Court telling him this is unconstitutional, we strike it down.
Yes, he's finally realized that his Solicitor General can't kind of get around this one, and he's decided that before it's too late and they actually come out with an order, let's try and save face. That's exactly what he's done.
The change that will happen on the 21st has three landmark issues that are important. Vaccines will suddenly be free to everyone regardless of age. States don't have to pay for vaccination and hospitals cannot charge whatever they want. There's a cap. But there is one issue that still hasn't been sorted out, and that's the digital divide. And that means that people under 45 have to register on CoWIN before they get a jab. People above 45 can literally walk in and get it without registering. And the Supreme Court has pointed out that this raises fundamental concerns for rural India, where registration is difficult, where Wi-Fi access is perhaps even impossible. Will you and your party, Mamata Banerjee in particular, continue to push for this change as well?
Yes, of course. We've already brought that up, and this is a completely, again, arbitrary. It's what does Article 14 and Article 21 say? It's right to access, it's right to equality. If you're saying that under 45 in a country such as ours, where only 500 million people have access to technology which will let them get the CoWIN app. I come from a rural constituency. If you try and tell the majority of people in my constituency you've got to go on this app and download it before you can get a vaccination, there's no way they can do it.
I'll tell you why I asked will Mamata Banerjee bring this up, because yesterday, Wednesday, she actually was talking about vaccination and things, and this issue didn't feature.
No, it doesn't matter. It's not that you bring everything up in one go, but this is something...
But she will bring it up.
Yes, of course we will bring it up.
And she'll insist on it.
Yes, of course we will, because this is something that is completely, again, arbitrary. You cannot have half the population have access to vaccination without going through this, and the other half of the population have to go through this ridiculous app.
This is clearly a breach of Article 14, which guarantees you will not be discriminated against.
Yes, of course it is, absolutely. Because why don't we... This is very simple, Karan. Let me get down to... There are two things that we need to take away from this. India as a country of the over 18 population is 1 billion. Yeah, it's $1 billion. The central government can go in and buy vaccines at 150 rupees or 200 rupees for $1 billion. That's 100 crores. That's going to cost you 20,000 crores or 30,000 crores. Say you pay 300 rupees a vaccine for it. Put aside 30,000 crores, decide on the best way and the quickest way possible to get access to 100 crore vaccines, and how best do we vaccinate at a speed of about 75 to 80 lakhs a day to get to that figure by December. That is the challenge that is facing
this would have been ideal if the government had thought of it along these lines.
But that's not the state government's problem. But that's not the state government's problem. They're playing catch up now.
The problem is everyone is now in February, March, April of this year.
Yes.
You know, no matter how much money you offer, you can't buy vaccines from abroad. They're not available.
Right.
They're not there on sale.
Yes.
Pfizer has indicated that it might be able to give over a 4-month period 50 million, which is not even a huge amount.
Yeah.
But no one else, absolutely no one else. Moderna can't give it till next year. AstraZeneca from abroad doesn't have anything to give. They're actually angry with Serum for not giving them more.
Right, because Serum is under contractual
Johnson is not giving anything to anyone. Novavax hasn't even come into being. So the truth is, what you're saying would have worked last year. This year, it's too late. Let me end by putting this to you. It's 5.5 months into the year. And during that short period of 5.5 months, India's vaccination policy has done 2 dramatic U-turns and somersaults. What does that tell you about the critical strategic thinking behind what is perhaps the most important policy for the country today?
I think it tells you the complete absence of any kind of critical strategic thinking. And that's what happens when you have this kind of a regime that absolutely just thrives on this mythical figure of this all-powerful Uberman. And when you're faced with a crisis where you actually need to take well thought out consultative decisions, you fail spectacularly. And unfortunately, India has had to pay a very heavy price for Modi's ego, and India's had to pay a very heavy price for this kind of brute majoritarianism which the BJP has brought in. And nothing has, I think, everything we've seen so far in the past 7 years, we've paid a price with demonetization, we paid a price with X or with Y, but nothing illustrates this spectacular failure of the government as this entire last 3 months has shown.
Let me pick up on that very evocative phrase, all-powerful Uberman.
Yeah.
What does his handling of the vaccine policy, the fact that he personally has done 2 huge somersaults in just 5.5 months, tell you about the Uberman's capacity to handle the challenge of vaccination?
You know, absolutely. I think the capacity is absolutely zilch. And I'd like to quote something that Justice Chandrachud also said. It says, when you accept a mistake, it's a sign of strength. It's not a sign of weakness. But unfortunately, Mr. Modi, if you heard his address to the nation, it was the pettiness that came across. And sort of, again, our entire exchange has been because Mr. Modi is still now trying to change the narrative and trying to blame the state governments, when he should have come out and said, you know what, we've made a mistake, we're trying to fix it. That's all that was needed.
So the corollary to what you're saying is, Mr. Modi, except you made a mistake, except you made a
That's what will make you a stronger man.
And you'll be a stronger man.
You'll be a stronger man, but even you're trying to accept it, but you're trying to do it so gracelessly. And even in your moment of what should have been your triumph, your moment of strength, where you say, you know what, we messed up, but I'm the greater man for it, let's move forward. Even then you're trying to be petty and say, oh, Mamata's done this, and Uddhav Thackeray's done this, and Mahua Moitra's done this. It's not about us, you're the Prime Minister.
My last question. Vaccination today is perhaps the most important thing that is needed, not just to give people confidence and dignity back in their lives, but also to revive our economy.
Yeah.
At this moment of the greatest challenge, how has Mr. Modi acquitted himself?
Mr. Modi lives election to election. I think the mess in Bengal and the fact that they didn't get the results that they wanted in Bengal has given them a bit of a setback. But for example, if UP goes their way, then that is going to be another stamp of approval, and he's going to be like, I've done nothing wrong, look.
So provided he wins UP, he can escape this.
That's the way Mr. Modi works, and that's the way the BJP works.
But how much damage in your eyes has vaccination and the handling of vaccination done to his image?
I'll tell you, even a year ago, For example, people like us in the opposition who speak out quite openly against, not personally against Mr. Modi because he is my Prime Minister, I have nothing personal against him, but against his policies and against some of the things that the BJP does, we are, people reach out to us both covertly and overtly from the BJP and say, you know what, please don't attack the Prime Minister. You know, he's above board. You can say anything you like about the BJP, but what the past 3 months has brought up has that little children on the road, normal people, a tonga wala, a rickshaw wala, are coming out and saying that Pradhan Mantri ne kya kiya hai. So this carefully cultivated image of a Prime Minister who could do no wrong has been smashed to smithereens in the last 3 months. And that, I think, has actually been good for the country, because till that happened, we could move forward.
He has 3 years more before an election.
Yes.
And if he wins UP, can he escape from the hole he's dug himself into?
That only time will tell, Karan. It's very difficult for you and me to sit here and...
it's too early to write him off then?
Yeah, this is Indian politics. It's too early to write him off, but I don't think we should look at it in terms of electoral politics. We should look at the danger it's done to India's image. I mean, look at India. It was the global pharmacist.
You're saying when India needed a strong man to deliver vaccines we had a vacillator who failed.
We failed our own country and we failed the world. Look at the way we failed Africa. We're the global pharmacist. And look what's happened today.
So Modi failed India and Modi failed
the world.
Africa.
Yes.
And Modi, in the process, you're saying, has damaged India's reputation as the pharmacy of the world.
Yes, it has. Of course it has.
COVAX will be upset with Modi, Gavi will be upset with Modi, Africa will feel let down with Modi, and India has been completely let down because we don't have the vaccine. So instead what you're saying is Modi blamed the state governments, you're squarely blaming Modi back.
Unequivocally.
Mahua Moitra, a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.